as we were discussing, we will be looking at the scattering problem as a central force problem. Before we do that, we need to introduce all the terminologies which are commonly used to define a scattering system. There will be a few new words today, so please pay attention and we'll try to discuss what all of that means. Okay. And time permitting, we will take up Rutherford scattering as an example to utilize the machinery which we develop in today's class. So we will have one example, Rutherford scattering, time permitting, definitely. Okay. All right. Basic motivation for studying scattering, one of the earliest ones is the alpha scattering experiment. And this is very important because the result of the alpha scattering experiment was very not very easy to explain with the existing understanding of physics. Basically, you have an extremely high energy particle called an alpha particle coming from a radioactive source, and you have a very, very thin foil of some material. In the case of Rutherford's experiment, it was a gold foil. Gold is easy to make into very thin foils. So what you expect is that this highly energetic object should go straight through. The comparison is like this, that you take a tissue paper and you shoot a bullet. What do you expect to happen? It will go straight through. There will be no, there is nothing else you can imagine. What Rutherford found was that using this bullet called alpha particle and this tissue paper called gold foil, when he does this shooting, sometimes the particles are not going straight through, they are deflected. And on some occasions, they are deflected backwards, at a backward angle, which means basically the bullet is bouncing off the tissue paper and coming backwards. Naturally, this physical picture of bullet and tissue paper is not a correct one as far as the structure of the gold foil is concerned. And this is what became evident from Rutherford's experiment. And then, of course, there was a proposal for an atomic model where we are having a positive charge which is concentrated at the center, and the negative charge is the electrons are all distributed all over the place. So instead of the earlier Dalton or Thomson type models where the positive and negative charge are all distributed over the entire thing, here Rutherford said that this distribution is over a very small region, the positive charge. It's located at the center. That was the only way which he could find to explain why in the alpha particle experiment some particles are going straight through. In fact, majority of the alpha particles go straight through. Few of them get deflected by some angle, and very, very few get deflected in the backward direction. So there is a distribution, angular distribution. Most of the particles go straight, some go slight deflection, and very, very few go deflected at a backward angle. But this deflection, in order to explain, Rutherford had to come up with this kind of atomic model, that the nucleus is a positive charge at the center and most of the space is empty, filled with electrons. Okay. So this was basically our origin of a lot of things in physics. This is the historical significance of scattering, but basic scattering process as such is very simple. You throw something at some other object and they will collide and then they will react. So in that context, we are all familiar with scattering. The example shown here is carom board, which is an example of contact-based scattering. When the striker hits the coin, striker moves in a different direction, coin moves in the different direction. So basically, this is an example of scattering. Another example of contact scattering is means batsman hitting the cricket ball. So the bowler always bowls in the same direction, batsman can hit in various directions. It's again an example of scattering as such. Not exactly a physically tenable example, but basically in colloquial sense, that is an example as well. Another example of scattering, uh, two people walking on the road towards each other, or two cars approaching towards each other. If they come too close, then they will naturally avoid each other and go. So sometimes if someone brings the cycle or something suddenly, and you are on a bike, let us say, then you have to make a sudden curve. The reason you have to do that is because you don't want to collide with that individual, and therefore you use your sense of vision to detect that there is going to be a collision, and you take some evasive measure. So in essence, that is what happens in the Rutherford alpha scattering experiment. One positive charge sees the other positive charge, and they mutually repel, and the second positive charge then changes its direction. That is what is Rutherford alpha scattering. Okay. So these are a few examples of scattering, and we would like to know a more concrete way of understanding this picture, and that is why we are doing what we are doing today, looking into the scattering problem. The basic idea of scattering, as we said, is that you have some particles all moving in the same direction with the same momentum, same velocity, identical particles, and there is a fixed point called a target. Let me try to indicate that. There is this fixed point called the target. In the Rutherford alpha scattering experiment, it was a atomic nucleus, but in general, the fixed object on which you are making these particles incident is called the target, and the particles which you are making incident on this are together called as a beam. Okay. So two new terminologies, one is beam and one is target. Beam means the particles which are coming, and target means the fixed particle on which they are being incident. Okay. So we have the target and particle beam as defined here. We want to know their properties. What properties are we interested in? First of all, they get scattered, and then you have got the scattered particles going in different directions. Okay. We would like to know, or this process would depend on the following parameters. One is, what is the nature of the incident beam? What is the energy of each particle? What is the momentum of each particle? Okay. How many particles are coming per unit area? What you mean by this is per unit cross-sectional area. That is, if I draw an area near the target, then how many are passing through it per unit time in imaginary surface perpendicular to the beam. This is something like what you have current density in electrodynamics, except this is not really current density. This is just particle number density, number current density. It is number of particles being incident per unit area per unit time. If the number of particles incident per unit area is less, amount of scattered particles will also be less. If the number of particles per unit time is less, number of scattered particles will also be less. Okay. And of course, the initial energy and momentum of the particles also makes a difference. So that is another parameter not written down here explicitly, but that is also there. What is the type of force interacting? It is something we have to know beforehand. Otherwise, it is not possible to predict what will be the outcome of the experiment. For example, suppose you have a problem. There are two cars moving towards each other. How far away will they be when the drivers decide that they want to avoid each other and go slightly change their direction? Answer to this question is, if they are moving at reasonable speed, then when they are few meters from each other. That is the answer. But that is assuming that the type of interaction between them is that the drivers are able to see each other. If they are not able to see, then the answer is when they collide, then only they will come to know that there is something wrong. So it depends on how the two particles are interacting with each other. So you need to know the nature of the scattering force. Okay. For example, a proton colliding with a proton will behave differently. A neutron colliding with a neutron will behave differently because the nature of interaction between them is different. Proton and proton at larger distances, there is a Coulomb repulsion between them. Neutron and neutron, there is nothing till they come extremely close. Then there is a nuclear attraction, that is the strong force-based attraction. So the interaction is different. The reaction of the particles will be different. And the third thing we would like to know is that can we correlate the direction in which the particle is being scattered with all this earlier information, initial properties of the beam and the nature of the scattering force. Using this, we would like to predict the directions of the scattering. So these are basic things which we would like to know. However, we have not yet defined any particular term. For that, we would like to have a closer look at what exactly we mean, what is happening. Scattering means one particle approaches the other particle, but then what happens? We would like to have a closer look at that. That is what we will look at now. Let us have a closer look at the process of scattering. Okay. Basically, we have the beam particle, which now we will use a new terminology. We will call it the projectile particle. When all of them are together, we call them collectively as a projectile beam. But when only one individual particle is being considered, which is what we are doing right now, we call it a projectile particle. Projectile means you have projected it. It is like projectile motion. You have projected it towards the target, and the target is a fixed particle here. There will be a principal axis in this problem. This dotted line indicates that. Basically, that is the direction in which the projectile is initially moved. So the initial motion of the projectile, there will be a line parallel to that passing through the target. So the projectile can be passing along this line, but it can be anywhere. There is an entire beam and we have considered one particle out of that beam. Okay. Basically, it will come, it will somehow kind of get repelled or something, and it will go in this direction. Okay. This is something which is perfectly understandable. This will be the nature of the problem. Okay. So one of the important things which we should note at this stage is that the distance at which initially the projectile is passing from the axis. Let us call it the x-axis, the horizontal axis. So the distance from the x, the vertical displacement from the x-axis at which the projectile is passing. This is a very important parameter. It is called the impact parameter of the collision. What is impact parameter? If there is a stationary particle and another particle is moving towards it, then the perpendicular distance means if there was no interaction between them, then basically the projectile will pass by the target at a distance of s. Because there is an interaction, it gets repelled. So ideally this particle, if there was no interaction, it would have passed from here. But since there is an interaction, it gets deflected. But the perpendicular distance at which the particle's path is from the principal axis is called the impact parameter of the collision. This is an extremely important quantity, as we will see when we go further. Okay. Once the projectile has been scattered by the target, it will continue to move away to infinity. And once it has reached a stable direction, one can try to draw another dotted line in the same direction, parallel to its final path. So the principal axis which we have drawn, the x-axis, is parallel to the initial path of the projectile. This line which we have drawn is parallel to the final path of the projectile. Okay. So basically, if we look at this from very, very far away, what happened? Particle came from very, very far away. Particle went very, very far away. And it was, of course, by symmetry, you can see that the once it has gone away, again, this distance will also be the same as the impact parameter. But the angle by which the direction of the projectile has changed, that angle is called the scattering angle, and we are going to denote it by the symbol theta s. Goldstein, just to give you a warning, Goldstein uses the symbol capital theta, which is very difficult to write in like regular notebook kind of thing. So we are going to write theta s. where S means scattering. So theta S means the angle by which the projectile direction has changed. Initial projectile direction was towards the right, and the final projectile direction is somewhere upwards. So the difference between these two directions is called the scattering angle. So two new terminology, actually 3 or 4 new terminologies. The fixed particle at which you are aiming the particles who are going to get scattered, that fixed particle is called the target. The particle which you are firing is called the projectile. The perpendicular distance between the projectile initial direction and the axis passing through the target parallel to this perpendicular distance is called the impact parameter. It is denoted by the symbol S. For your reference, since it is not clearly visible, it is small s, not capital S. Okay, small s. And after the particle interacts, after the projectile particle interacts, it will get scattered in some other direction. Eventually, again, it starts moving in a straight line after it is outside the region of influence of that target particle. And once it has attained this final direction, one can again draw a dotted line passing through the target parallel to this, and by symmetry consideration, that distance will also be equal to the same impact parameter S. And the angle between the old direction of the projectile and the new direction of the projectile is called the scattering angle. We are going to represent the scattering angle by the symbol theta S, theta suffix S. Okay, this is where we have reached so far. If you repeat this for multiple projectiles, then what you will get is the picture which is shown up, that many projectiles come and hit the particle and they will go in different directions. Now, if you will notice something, the angle by which a particle is scattered is dependent on its impact parameter. In this particular example, the ones which have small impact parameter are getting deflected by larger angles. Angle is always measured from the positive axis to the right. So larger angle means backward angle and smaller angle means more or less in the forward direction. So basically, higher the impact parameter, lesser is the scattering angle, and lower the impact parameter, when close to 0, the scattering angle is very, very high. In the right in the middle, the scattering angle is 180 degrees. Okay. So with this kind of picture in mind, obviously one would like to know some kind of relation between the impact parameter and the scattering angle. There will be some relation, and that is what we intend to find out. Okay. With that aim, let us try to define a few more ideas here. Firstly, I can draw a plane which is perpendicular to the projectile direction. Okay. So projectile is coming this way, and this is the plane passing through. It's an imaginary plane. Okay. So there will be an imaginary surface through which the projectile particle is passing. Okay. In that imaginary surface, I can draw a circle of radius S, S being the impact parameter. Okay. And I can take a small patch of thickness delta S. So I'll get a ring-shaped region as it is shown over here. Okay. So this is a plane perpendicular to the motion of the projectile, or perpendicular to the plane in which the projectile and target are interacting. This is an imaginary surface in that direction. And in that, I take a patch which has radius S and thickness delta S. So I'll get a patch of this type. Okay. And obviously this projectile particle is passing through some small part of this patch. Okay. As it is shown by the shaded part over here. Okay. So projectile particle is passing through this. But basically, as far as impact parameter is concerned, whether the projectile particle is passing through here or any part of this ring, all are equivalent, because there is an azimuthal symmetry to this problem. There is a symmetry around this axis, and therefore this whole patch of area is basically equivalent. Okay. Now, what happened to this projectile particle which entered this area? Let us call it dA. Basically, it got scattered, and if you try to find out at what direction it got scattered, then basically you will have to construct a sphere around the target, and you will say that it passed through some patch of the area of this sphere. Let us understand this very clearly. Basically, all the particles are coming and incident on the target. After hitting the target, they go in all different directions, as it is shown in this upper diagram. Barabar hai? So basically, what I can imagine is that around the target, let me draw a kind of sphere, something like that. Is that visible?
Yes, sir.
And now I will see that for different impact parameters, at what different angles my scattering is taking place. So I know that impact parameter 0, scattering angle 180 degree, because the exit path of the projectile takes it from this part of this sphere. Okay. For this projectile, the exit path takes it from this angle. So scattering angle is this much. So I can always map all the scattered particles to a exit point on this sphere, which is centered on the target particle. Let me repeat. I draw an imaginary sphere around the target particle. I figure out how different particles are being scattered. I can always associate one particular point in this sphere as an exit point for a given particle. Is this okay? Is this fine?
Yes.
Just to note very quickly that suppose I consider this particle, the one which I have shaded in, let us say, reddish color. Okay? If I consider that guy, then basically the exit point on the sphere, how do I imagine that? Basically draw an axis parallel to the final direction of scattering passing through the target, and this is the point of exit as far as I am concerned. Because when I zoom out from this picture, what I will see is the following. There is a target particle and there is a projectile beam which is incident. And what will happen to this projectile beam afterwards? It will get scattered in various directions. So from very, very far away, all I will see is that a beam came, and if I have an imaginary spherical surface, particles exited at various points on this surface. This sphere is centered on the target. Remember that. That is all that I am saying. So basically, we want to say that if the initial projectile passed through this patch of area A, then the final direction of the projectile is going to pass through this sphere centered around the target. I am saying the direction of the projectile is passing through. I am not saying the projectile itself is passing through. What is the difference? The direction, the dotted line in the direction, final direction of the projectile passes through the target, and since the sphere is centered on the target, it is this dotted line which I am concerned with when I am talking about the scattering angle. I am not concerned with the actual projectile position. It may intersect the sphere somewhere else, for example here. But I am going to say that this is the exit point, because on this sphere, this is what will give me the angle. This will give me the wrong angle, because the angle is measured. Basically, if I take this as the exit point, the scattering angle I will measure will be this much, a larger amount. I think this diagram is very messed up now, so I'm rubbing everything. Do you want me to repeat that point once or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Basically, consider this point. This was clear to everyone, right? I am talking about the second particle from top. Okay? It came, it got scattered in this direction, correct? So this projectile path, actual path, intersects the sphere at this point. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So from here, if I do this, then I will get a wrong idea that scattering angle is this much. Is this correct? Scattering angle is this angle? No.
No.
Scattering angle is only this much. It's a much smaller angle. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So what should I do for avoiding this mistake? Basically, I take the projectile direction. What is the final direction of the projectile? This direction, correct? And I draw a parallel line passing through the target, more or less parallel. Probably wrong, but barabar hai, parallel to this. And then I say that actual scattering angle is this much. Correct?
Yes.
This is clear how we arrived at the scattering angle in this picture.
Yes, sir.
सर वो इमेजिनरी हम लोग डायरेक्शन बनाते हैं तो उसका वो डिस्टेंस इम्पैक्ट पैरामीटर जितना ही रहेगा ना वो एक्चुअल पाथ से.
हाँ, ये इम्पैक्ट पैरामीटर जितना ही रहेगा. This you are talking about, right? This
Yes.
you are talking about?
Yes.
Yes, that will be equal to the impact. That is by symmetry, because if you reverse the interaction is going to be the same. If you reverse the projectile path, it has to follow this path only, because the interaction is the same. Okay?
Okay.
Very good. So basically, whenever the projectile passes through a patch of area dA, the final direction of the projectile will pass at an angle d theta from the target. This is our basic conclusion. If instead of passing from the top part of this ring, if the projectile was passing from the side part of this ring, that scattered direction will pass through the side part of this patch of the sphere. Okay? So this patch of the sphere can be called as something called solid angle, which is d omega. Okay? And so our final statement is, whenever the projectile passes through the patch of area dA, the scattered direction of the projectile lies within a solid angle d omega, which is defined in the way it is defined in the figure. Okay? Solid angle is just a fancy way of saying that I am counting both theta and phi. Okay? Means when you say solid angle d omega, what you mean is a certain range of phi and certain range of theta. Okay? It's kind of two-dimensional angle when you call it solid angle. Okay? And here basically phi, which is the angle around this axis, you have basically integrated around that. So basically you have all 180 degrees, all 360 degrees available to you. And theta is within theta s plus or minus delta theta s. That is the definition of the d omega as it is shown in this figure. Okay? So basically what you are saying is that if the projectile particle is passing through a certain ring in space, then the scattered direction of that projectile particle will fall within a certain slice of that sphere centered around, or direction of the projectile will fall in a certain slice of the sphere centered around the target particle. Physically, I hope this is clear. Geometrically, you might want to look into what is solid angle, etc., but that is more a issue of semantics basically, rather than physical concept. The concept is very clear. I hope that I can always map a ring which has radius equal to the impact parameter. Any projectile particle passing through that ring will automatically pass through a patch of this particular sphere drawn around the target. Okay? Through a solid angle d omega. Solid angle is basically a patch of angle which can be 180 degree around the principal axis of scattering, and which can be within an angle theta s plus or minus delta theta s in the theta direction. With this idea, let us try to now proceed a little further. Basically, this is the diagram which we had on the previous page, and we are now introducing a new conceptual idea. Basically, now we will talk about the number of particles passing through this ring. Instead of talking about a single projectile, there will be several particles like this projectile, all passing through this ring of area dA on this horizontal surface. And so on this perpendicular surface. So basically the number of particles initially flowing through the area dA will somehow be proportional to the number of particles scattered in the solid angle d omega. Okay. This is what we said last time, only we have made it more concrete. We said that number of particles flowing through this should be proportional to number of particles scattered into solid angle d omega. Okay. Actually it will be equal, but let us say it is proportional. Then how to mathematically write this? Basically one can say that the current, that is number of particles flowing per unit area per unit time, I am calling it intensity of the beam. It's a terminology which I didn't really introduce, but basically I is intensity of the beam, which is number of particles per unit area per unit time passing through the area dA will be equal to the same number of particles per unit area per unit time into the angle d omega multiplied by a certain factor. This factor, which is denoted by the symbol sigma, is called the scattering cross section. Basically at this stage where we are, the scattering cross section seems to be some kind of proportionality factor between the two things which are mentioned in the previous line, number of particles flowing through the area dA and number of particles scattered into the angle d omega, solid angle d omega. There is a proportionality factor between the two of them, and this proportionality factor we are denoting by the symbol sigma. It is a factor, it is not a proportionality constant. What I mean by this is it is a function of omega. It need not be a constant. It could be dependent on various things. Okay? And this sigma of omega, which is a proportionality factor between particles which are flowing through the area dA and particles which are scattered into the solid angle d omega, this is called the scattering cross section. This is the name given to that particular quantity. Okay? As we will show that this particular thing can be interpreted as a cross section in a very different way, but we'll come to that eventually. Okay? So let me repeat the definition of scattering cross section as we have arrived at it. What we are saying is that number of particles flowing through this patch of area dA should be proportional to number of particles finally scattered through the solid angle d omega. And we are saying that because these two numbers have to be related to each other, we will introduce a proportionality factor. It need not be a proportionality constant. Mane every angle need not have equal amount of scattering. It could be different, and therefore it could depend on the scattering angle or the scattering solid angle as we have defined here. And so this proportionality factor we are denoting by the symbol sigma, and we are going to call this quantity the scattering cross section. Okay? It is a terminology which has been handed down. It is like our legacy, जो विरासत में आया है अपने को from Rutherford's time. Otherwise, many authors have given their opinion that cross section is a very bad name for this quantity because it is not really cross section. As you can see, dimensionally it has dimensions of area just by comparing dimensions on the two sides. That is the only real reason for calling it as cross section, but it's a very misleading term as such. It is more of a scattering probability kind of actually physical quantity, but it is called as scattering cross section. You have to live with that particular terminology. Okay? But remember how it arose in our discussion. It arises as a kind of proportionality factor between how many particles are passing through this ring dA and how many are scattered into the angle d omega. But what is this ring dA? It is a ring which has radius equal to the impact parameter. So basically the scattering cross section tells you if the particles are coming at a certain impact parameter, how is this related to them being scattered through the angle theta s? That is what the scattering cross section is going to tell you. Okay? Let us try to make this more concrete. Basically, we know that we have defined the scattering cross section in this way. The number of particles per unit area per unit time flowing through the area dA is equal to the number of particles per unit area per unit time scattered through the solid angle d omega with a proportionality factor which is given by sigma. Okay. Our aim is to find out what is sigma, and this is how we will go about it. Let us first write down what do you mean by dA. Basically, the patch of area dA is a ring. So it is a circle with some thickness. Okay. So if you try to find out what is geometrically the area, basically it will be circumference of the circle multiplied by the thickness, which is nothing but 2 pi s times ds. 2 pi s is the circumference of the circle and ds is the thickness. So the area of that patch will be 2 pi s ds. If you look at the other part, the solid angle d omega, you will find that basically this will be integration of sine theta d theta d phi. Integral d phi straight away gives you 2 pi, and hence 2 pi sine theta d theta. That is the definition of solid angle. Okay. We can substitute these two things in the main equation, and you will end up with this particular expression. You will get 2 pi I times s times ds is equal to 2 pi I times sigma times sine theta times d theta. We have replaced sigma of omega by sigma of theta s, because omega is basically a function of phi and theta s, but phi dependence is not there in this problem, and therefore sigma is only a function of theta s. That is why we have written it in this manner. You can cancel the 2 pi I term which stands at the beginning, and if you do that, you end up with the following expression for theta s after rearranging the terms. Okay. I know that this is not the same as writing with the pen, because the equation comes too quickly. Let us work with this right now. Okay. I'll probably give you a couple of minutes for those who want to note down this step by step. And in the meantime, if there is any doubt regarding this, please ask. This seems to be an acceptable expression mathematically. We have no clue what it means physically, but that will come to at a later stage. Okay, but mathematically this makes sense to everyone.
Yes, sir.
So you have got an expression for this sigma. The sigma is supposed to be a kind of proportionality factor which tells you if the particle arrives at a certain impact parameter s, then what will be its likelihood of being scattered into the scattering angle theta s, that kind of quantity. And you have got an expression for that guy which contains both s and theta s. So apart from the cross section, you have to independently find some relation between s and theta s, otherwise this problem is not solvable. Okay. Which is what will occupy us for the rest of the discussion. With this, armed with this expression, let us try to understand a few things. Basically, what do we want to do when we say I am having a scattering problem? What we want is, we need an expression for s as a function of theta, or for theta as a function of s. One of the two, we need it. Okay. Once we have that, we can differentiate ds by d theta s or d theta s by ds and take the inverse and substitute it in this cross section formula. Very important thing, what we are calling as theta, sigma of theta, and what Goldstein also calls as sigma of theta, in many books that particular quantity is written as d sigma by d omega. This is another way of writing what we are calling as sigma. Some people call it as d sigma by d omega. The reason for this, I will make it clear in a moment. This quantity, or alternately this quantity, is called the differential cross section. earlier we called it simply scattering cross section, but a more correct terminology is differential scattering cross section. Okay. Once you have obtained the differential scattering cross section using this formula, so first step kya hai? Either obtain S as a function of theta or theta as a function of S. Substitute it here, you will get Ts by d theta s, and you can substitute S as a function of theta as well. So this whole thing will be just a function of theta then. Once you have obtained this quantity is called the differential cross section. You can integrate this over solid angle to get something called the total cross section. Because this integration can be done, that is why this quantity is often called the differential cross section. Okay. And once you obtain the total cross section, basically we claim that the scattering problem is completely solved. Okay. Sorry. So basically our idea is to obtain S as a function of theta. That should be our working policy. Once you obtain that, substitute it into the expression for the cross section. And if you integrate this over all solid angles, it will give you something called a total cross section. It is, of course, all this is mathematics or otherwise some kind of conceptual thought. There is still no physical feel to this whole thing. So let us try to get a physical feel to this before we move forward. Okay. This is an example which shows two different types of potential. One is called the hard sphere potential, which is basically your carom board kind of thing. The particle, only when the other particle comes and collides, only then it will be deflected. Otherwise, it will not be deflected. There is no long range interaction between the particles. This is one extreme. Other is the Coulomb potential, which you can see that from larger distance itself, particles are getting repelled. Okay. Another thing to note, smaller impact parameter leads to larger angle of deflection and larger impact parameter leads to smaller angle of deflection. We'll come to this point in a moment. Okay. So as S increases, theta decreases. This is something which I would just like to note here also. S is small, theta is large. S is larger, theta is smaller. S is even larger, theta is even smaller, and so on. Okay. If you look at these two pictures, one thing is kind of becoming clear. What is that? Basically, what is the particle doing? It is preventing some of the projectile particles from continuing along their original path. Agreed? It is preventing the projectile particles from moving along their original path. In both the cases, however, the nature of the prevention is very different. In the hard sphere case, the sphere is just covering as much region as it itself covers. On the other hand, in the Coulomb case, this is more like it is, even though the particle is smaller in size than what it is in the hard sphere case, it seems to be covering larger area. This is something like in football. Take the example. I don't know how many of you follow football as a sport. There is a goal and you have to put the ball in the goal. Everyone is aware of this, certainly. There are two types of players. One is goalkeeper and one is non-goalkeeper, as far as this example is concerned. Okay. Now, goalkeeper can use his hands, body, head, legs, anything to prevent the ball from going inside the goal. Ordinary player cannot use the hands, they cannot use the shoulders, so they can use their head or their feet or center part of the body, nothing else. So the capability of a ordinary player to prevent a goal is very limited because he cannot stretch out his hands. So the goalkeeper actually stretches out the hands, it is significant increase in the range. Okay. So the hard sphere potential is like an ordinary player trying to stop the goal. He can only stop within a certain limited with his body, he can prevent, that is all. Goalkeeper can dive, he can use both the hands. So goalkeeper has much wider range of saving the goal. Coulomb potential is similar to that in that context. Okay. That is a comparison between hard sphere and Coulomb potential. There can be several other potential. I am not going into this. We have seen several potentials in our earlier example in central force problems. So any of those have, all of those have, or most of those have scattering solutions. Apart from harmonic oscillator and Cornell potential, I think all of them have scattering solutions. So any of those potentials can be used, and you can see the effect of that. Okay. Let me just increase the number of particles, and you can see that the hard sphere potential is preventing the particles from going. But if you see from the beam's viewpoint, the area covered by this guy is only this much. It's a circular patch of this much area, which is prevented by the hard sphere potential from the projectile. So there is a forbidden region, which is basically having some area equal to pi r square, where r is the radius of the sphere. Is that okay? Is that clear to everyone? मतलब मैं मेरे पीछे नहीं जा रहा था, बाकी किधर भी जाओ तुम, बराबर है?
Yes.
Now look at the Coulomb potential with large number of particles. Even though the actual particle is a small sphere here, the surface which it presents to the incoming particle beam is like a very, very large paraboloid surface. Everyone can see that?
Yes, sir.
And if you increase the size of the beam, it won't matter. Basically, this guy doesn't allow anyone to come within a patch which is like a parabola from here to here, paraboloid surface. And what is the parabola का end point क्या है? There is no end point. It goes to infinity. बराबर है? So basically, how you interpret this in normal physical terms is that you say that the total cross section for the Coulomb potential is infinite. What do you mean by this? If you integrate over all possible impact parameter, all possible solid angles over which the particle is scattered, then basically you will get this area. Basically this parabola, I am just continuing it and I am drawing a dotted line. Basically this area is infinity because this parabola keeps on going till infinity. Okay? This area is how much? Pi r square. बराबर है? So here the area is pi r square. Here the area is infinity. Agreed?
Yes.
This quantity, when you calculate using the formalism which we described earlier, turns out to be the total cross section. So what is the geometrical interpretation of the total cross section? The area over which the particle has an effect on the projectile particles, or the area which the target doesn't allow the projectile to access. Basically, it is some kind of cross-sectional area of forbidden region. This is all forbidden region. No particles are allowed to come. Agreed? It is obviously forbidden because the particles are simply not being allowed. Particle comes, it has to deflect here. बराबर है? So this area of this forbidden region which is there, or the area over which the particle has an influence, the target has an influence over the projectile particles, that area is called the total cross section. So in this context, one can interpret total cross section as a kind of area type of quantity. ठीक है? Differential cross section का ऐसा interpretation नहीं है. What is our interpretation of differential cross section? ठीक है? Look at the angles at which the different particles are being deflected. Everyone can see that, ne? Particles being deflected in different directions. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Now look at the density of lines for the hard sphere potential, look at the density of lines for the Coulomb potential. Do you see a difference?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Here they are kind of approximately equally distributed. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Whereas here you have a clear distinction that at backward angle the lines are less dense, and more forward you go, the lines are more dense. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So the differential cross section which is also denoted by the symbol d sigma by d omega. I am mentioning this again and again because most textbooks, especially within quantum mechanics or even classical mechanics, they will describe the differential cross section in this way. In fact, David Griffith's Introduction to Quantum Mechanics, I know you don't have scattering this semester, you'll probably have it next semester. But in fact, Griffiths has a whole paragraph explaining why differential cross section is a very bad name for this quantity. Because it is not a differential quantity. You just integrate it to get total cross section. That does not mean this object is a differential. It is a quantity in its own right. It is a proportionality factor relating the particles passing through a patch of area dA and the particles passing through the solid angle d omega. Okay? So it is a proportionality factor. It is not a differential quantity in the true sense. It is also not a cross section. It is not a cross sectional area. It is just a quantity which has dimensions of area. Probably, unfortunately, it has dimensions of area, you can say. Okay? But basically, the physical significance of differential cross section is that it gives you an information about the angular distribution of scattering. For example, in hard sphere scattering, the angular distribution is uniform. In Coulomb Coulomb potential, this is basically Rutherford scattering, if you realize it. Okay? Coulomb potential kya hai? Interaction between two charges. What is Rutherford experiment? Same thing, interaction between two positive charges. So this is basically Rutherford scattering. In Rutherford scattering, the angular distribution is much steep at the smaller angles and much flatter at larger angles. At larger angle, the cross section is less. The smaller angle, the cross section is more. So the sigma of theta basically measures the density of the scattered particles in different directions. It measures the angular distribution. Okay? So if you want to finally conclude, basically sigma of theta can be interpreted as a measure of the angular distribution of scattering. Okay? And the so-called total cross section can be interpreted as the area of the forbidden region. That is the region in which the particles are not allowed to go. Okay? Obviously, angular distribution and area of forbidden region are not the same physical thing, not the same physical object, not the same physical concept. So sigma total is integration of sigma is just a coincidence, or rather sigma total has a different interpretation and sigma differential has a different interpretation, but their physical interpretation are very, very different. Sigma total talks about the area patch which the particles are not allowed to go or prevented from going. Okay? For the Coulomb potential, it turns out that the area of this patch is infinite. And mathematically, we will obtain sigma total is equal to infinity. And at that stage, we should not scratch our heads. That is why here we have done this kind of physical interpretation. Okay? The sigma function of theta, which is the differential cross section, is actually a measure of angular distribution of scattering. Yes, Meet, bolo.
सर ये जो बीम आ रही है तो सर उसका अगर इम्पैक्ट पैरामीटर अगर जब बढ़ता जाएगा तो एक पर्टिकुलर केस आएगा जब वो बीम एक स्ट्रेट लाइन में पास होगी अगर इम्पैक्ट पैरामीटर ज्यादा हुआ तो एंड सर ये पैराबोला का
as you can see, for the Coulomb potential, this thing is a parabola. So parabola actually, as you keep increasing the distance, it keeps growing. There is no limit to the size of the parabola. Na? So I mean, with that interpretation, one can imagine that even for very large impact parameter, you will have some effect. Physically, basically, the Coulomb potential falls off as 1 by r. Ne? It is a 1 by r potential. So basically, even at very large distance, it will have an influence. In practical terms, this is not, this cannot be observed rather, or it is not observed, let us say, because in practical terms, the alpha particle, if it is having an impact parameter, let us say, larger than the atomic radius, then basically what happens is that the electrons are all shielding the nucleus, and basically it will see zero charge. So there is a shielding effect of the electrons, which is not considered here. Here you are only taking bare nucleus on bare nucleus kind of thing. But in real atomic gold foil, you won't get a pure Coulomb, at least at very large impact parameters. Okay. So for near zero scattering angle, your results will deviate. But basically, for all angles where the scattering is significant, the Rutherford cross section works very well. Okay. But in reality, even however far you are, if it is a pure bare charge, you will always have an influence. In practical terms, a real atom with electrons gets shielded out beyond, let us say, atomic radius, and therefore you have a different behavior there. I hope that clears the thing.
Yes, sir.
Good question. Thank you. Okay. All right. If this is okay with everyone, let us move forward. Now, let us try to kind of amalgamate or kind of combine our old understanding of central force problem and this particular idea of scattering. Let us try to kind of combine these two. Basically, the purpose of this is that we have done a lot of work on central force. In particular, we have obtained orbit equation in general form for any kind of potential. Okay? And basically, the scattering trajectory which you have is an orbit, because the interaction is between projectile and target. So basically, the projectile continuously talks to target along the line joining the two. So basically, we are going to interpret this, scattered, incident and scattered trajectory of the projectile as a central force problem. Let us have a look. Basically, this is our old picture, you know it. Projectile comes, passes with an impact parameter S, gets scattered, goes away. It has an initial momentum m times v0. The point here is that the total energy of the projectile will be equal to potential energy plus kinetic energy. We have established that for a pure central force problem, energy is a conserved quantity, because the Hamiltonian is equal to the total energy, and Hamiltonian is conserved because the Lagrangian doesn't depend on time. So because a total energy is a constant, and at very large distance, for a repulsive potential, at very large distance, you can go back and look at all your potentials which we have seen, so many examples in central force. At large r, all of them go to zero, and if they don't go to zero, then they don't have any scattering trajectories associated with them. Classic examples, harmonic oscillator and Cornell potential, no scattering trajectories associated with it. But whenever there is a scattering trajectory associated, then at large distance r, the potential energy is zero, which means at very large distance, the potential energy is zero, total energy is equal to the kinetic energy. Therefore, the kinetic energy is equal to the total energy, it is a constant, and therefore the momentum is also a constant, and the momentum will be given by mv0, where v0 is the initial velocity of the projectile. Okay. If you look at this diagram, the momentum is in the horizontal direction, let us say in the x-axis direction, and its value is mv0. ठीक है. And the perpendicular part of the radius vector is a line joining the projectile to the target, but the perpendicular part of that is the impact parameter. These two things can help us to define the angular momentum. The angular momentum will just be momentum into perpendicular distance. It is basically rp sine theta in magnitude, and r sine theta will give you s, and therefore you will get L is equal to mv naught into s. Okay. And mv naught itself, as we have discussed, it can be written assuming that the energy is pure kinetic energy, you can write it as square root of 2m times e. Okay. So you end up with this expression for angular momentum. L is equal to s into square root of 2me. This we can reserve for later use. This will be very useful later on. Okay. Because in central force motion, L is a constant, so we can replace L in terms of s. It's a very useful thing. Okay. Let us define a few other things. Of course, we have a scattered direction, scattering angle. Now, if you look at this, if you tilt your head slightly to the side, you know, what will you see? You find that this scattered direction and incident direction together are kind of making a symmetric figure. You can see that. Okay, tilt your head little to the side, you can see that both of them are making a symmetric figure. And the bisector of this is what I have labeled here as principal axis. It is a principal axis of symmetry of the orbit. We are now shifting our thinking from my laboratory condition. A projectile aisa hai, target idhar tha, projectile gaya. So this was my principal axis, the direction along which the projectile was traveling. When I was thinking of the problem as a scattering problem, as a laboratory problem where I have a actual accelerator processing a beam like this and so on. Now my focus is shifted. Now I am more focused on the trajectory itself, and I want to treat it as a kind of orbit. Then the axis of symmetry of that particular orbit will be my principal axis for my current consideration. That is what we have drawn here. And now if you look at this whole thing, you know, the principal axis is a symmetry axis between the left and right half of the trajectory. Okay. Basically, the angle between this axis and the initial and final direction of the projectile will be equal. It's an angular bisector, as we said. I am going to call this angle as psi. Okay. So basically, initial direction to symmetry axis, angle is psi. Symmetry axis to final direction of projectile, also angle is psi. And initial direction to final direction, angle is theta s. So basically theta s plus psi will be equal to 180 degree or pi. This is also going to be important. So please watch out for that as well. Okay. And you can see that there will be a minimum radius of approach, r min, which will be basically when the trajectory intersects this particular axis of symmetry. At that point you will have r minimum, and the particle comes at large r, reaches r minimum, and then again goes away to large. This is the basic concept over here. Okay. The figure, maybe the drawing part of the symmetry may be not extremely convincing, but basically the concept is there. Okay. Terminology is introduced here, new ones. There are 2 or 3. One is that we have introduced the concept of angular momentum is equal to linear momentum into perpendicular distance, which is perfectly fair. It's a cross product. And initial value of momentum is given by square root of 2m times the total energy, because at initial condition at very large distance, potential energy is 0. So kinetic energy equal to total energy, and then you get this expression. And therefore you get L is equal to s times square root of 2me. So once you have fixed s, L is automatically fixed, because 2me are all constants. Okay. So L depends on s. That is what you have here. Okay. And basically, if you look at the trajectory of the projectile from initial to final, you find that it is symmetric. Axis of symmetry of that you have indicated here. The angle from the initial arm of the projectile trajectory to the symmetry axis you are calling as psi. Same psi angle is between the symmetry axis and the final arm of the motion of the projectile. And basically, psi plus theta s is going to be 180 degrees. Okay, all these things we are seeing from this particular diagram. Let us look at this from another viewpoint, slightly rotated viewpoint. Again, you have the target. Only now let us try to draw the symmetry axis or the principal axis along the horizontal direction. So basically, this is the same problem. Projectile came, interacted with the target, got scattered at a different direction. Only I have changed my direction of viewing the problem. Okay. Now, again, you have this R minimum distance from the target. You have a projectile initial direction and projectile final direction. Their angle is theta s. We know this. We have a principal axis of symmetry for the orbit. We know this. And the angle between this and the two arms of the projectile, incoming and outgoing arm, are both labeled as psi. We know all of this. This is just a tilted view of the same thing which I had on the previous page. Only I have tilted it such that the principal axis of symmetry of the orbit lies along the horizontal direction. That's all. It's the same problem. You can have a look. Turn your head, you will find that it's the same problem. Okay. Now, how do we correlate this with things which we already know? That is the question. One thing you have is that theta, which is the scattering angle, is pi minus 2 times psi, which is obvious, which we already stated from the previous thing. Okay. If you look at this particular thing in the context of central force motion, this is very interesting. Basically, in any general effective potential problem in central force motion, you can have this kind of trajectory. Particle comes from very large distance, reaches till a particular distance r min, and then again starts moving away. Okay. This is a typical problem in central force scattering. Okay. So basically, this upper diagram showing the orbit in red color can easily correspond to the potential shown in the lower diagram. This is a arbitrary, some random potential. Basically, what you need is a feature where there is a R minimum and the energy is sufficient so that it is able to move to infinity. Those are the only conditions for a scattering type of trajectory. Okay. This is the same picture. Basically, as we said, V effective at R minimum will be equal to the total energy. As you can see from here, at R minimum, the value of the V effective curve matches with the total energy of the particle. And that is why that happens to be a turning point for the trajectory of the particle. And at R tends to infinity, the V effective will be 0. This is something which we already discussed earlier. Okay. We have circled the expression for theta s because we will use it in what comes further. Okay. Is this viewpoint okay for everyone? That this problem can be seen as a central force problem in this particular way. The scattering problem can be seen as a central force problem. Any questions at this stage? If not, then let us move further. I hope it is clear to everyone what we have done. Now we are going to use our knowledge of central force orbit equation in order to obtain a equation for the scattering cross section. That is what we are going to do. Okay. This is our figure which we had on the previous page. And the orbit equation, we can basically write it in this particular form. This is, please watch this carefully. Basically, the original equation, if you remember, was d theta equal to minus 1 upon square root of all these things times du. This was our original equation. We have substituted here limits of integration. Let us just spend some time on this. Basically, we are integrating from 0 to psi. That is theta equal to 0 to theta equal to psi. where theta equal to 0 corresponds to this direction and theta equal to psi corresponds to this direction. And at theta equal to 0, basically r will be equal to r min, or in other words, u will be equal to u maximum. And at psi is equal to psi, or sorry, theta equal to psi, basically r will be tending to infinity, or theta, u will be tending to 0. So the limits of integration are basically r minimum to r maximum. R maximum is infinity. But when r is equal to r minimum, u will be equal to u max. And when r is equal to infinity, u will be equal to 0. That is what these limits of integration are. The rest of it is straightforward as it is we have taken. Okay. With this in mind, let us try to substitute, not substitute, but basically try to obtain an integral form for this equation. If you continue this, basically this is the equation. Integral 0 to psi of d theta is just psi. And we have inverted the limits on u to get rid of the minus sign. Now, let us use the fact that L is related to S. What we are doing is we are using the relation between angular momentum and impact parameter, which we had noted earlier. And so we'll substitute for angular momentum in terms of impact parameter. You can rearrange this expression to show that this is equal to 2me by L square is equal to 1 by S square. As you can see, you can substitute that here. And here you can take V by E common, and 2me by L square can again be substituted by S square. If you do all this substitution, basically you end up with the following expression. Psi will be equal to integral 0 to u max 1 upon square root of 1 by S square into 1 minus V by E minus u square du. Okay. I can of course take S 1 upon S square out common and take it to the numerator. So I will get S upon square root of 1 minus V by u minus S square u square. This is by taking 1 by S square out common, become 1 by S and go up. And theta we know is pi minus 2 psi. So you can substitute that here. So you will get theta S is equal to pi minus 2 times integral 0 to u max S upon square root of 1 minus V by E minus S square u square du. Okay. What we have achieved here is that we have got theta as a function of S. S is not inside the integral. It is as far as the integration is concerned, it is a constant. Okay. For a given impact parameter, this is the expression for the orbit. And so S is a given quantity. It is a constant. In fact, it is equal to L upon square root of 2me. All of them are constants. You know that. Okay. Theta S is pi minus 2 times psi, and we have substituted here. Basically, you can take this expression and differentiate this with respect to S. D theta by ds you can do right away. There is nothing, there is no problem with that. Okay. In principle, you can do that. And you can obtain the solution. So basically, if you take this as your final expression, you have basically completed your program of scattering theory. Basically, if you remember, your approach was that first we need to know theta as a function of S or S as a function of theta. You have got that from the central force orbit equation. You have got theta as a function of S. You can substitute this particular ds by d theta in the formula. You can substitute it for sine theta in the formula. And if you multiply all of them, you will get the differential cross section. So your aim to find the differential cross section. The differential cross section, as we saw, physical interpretation of the differential cross section, it gives you the angular distribution of scattering. At which scattering angle, how much amount of scattering is going to happen. It gives you that information. And basically, you have managed to get that, at least in principle. As we said in the case of central force motion itself, when we had the general orbit equation, we say now at least we can do numerically, if not analytically, we can find the solution. Same is true over here. Basically, you substitute for V. Once you substitute for V, if you are able to integrate the expression, well and good. Otherwise, you integrate it numerically. And after doing the numerical integration, you basically substitute it in the cross-section formula. So you can definitely obtain the cross-section numerically if you can't obtain it analytically. Okay? And if if you substitute V and you find that the integration is integrable, then basically you can do it analytically as well. Okay? So basically, this is a stage where we say that at least in principle, I have solved the scattering problem once and for all. What was the problem? The problem was to obtain the differential cross section, because that is the one which tells you exactly what is happening in the scattering particle. इतना सारा है तो कौन कौन किधर किधर गया. That is the information contained in the differential scattering cross section. And basically you have obtained theta as a function of S, which is what you need for substituting in the formula for differential cross section. So basically you can say that at this stage our whole problem of central force motion is complete. Scattering motion is complete. Any scattering problem, if you tell me the scattering potential, I can tell you the cross section. As simple as that. Okay? So with this kind of conclusive note on the general formalism of scattering, since we have the time, let us try to take up an example. Okay. The example we are taking up is the example of Rutherford scattering. We'll obtain the formula for the Rutherford scattering cross section. Basically, Rutherford scattering is scattering between two charges with the same polarity. Here we are assuming both of them are positive charges with positive charge Z1 times E and Z2 times E respectively. So Z1 times E could be, Z1 could be the atomic number of gold, 79, and Z2 could be atomic number of the alpha particle, which is 2. Okay? So alpha particle scattering from a gold atom will have this kind of potential energy, Z1 Z2 E square upon 4 pi epsilon 0 R, where you have used SI units, obviously. If you compare this with the general form, V of R is equal to minus K by R, then basically V of R here is plus Z1 Z2 E square by 4 pi epsilon 0 R. So by comparison with minus K by R, you find that K can be written as minus Z1 Z2 E square by 4 pi epsilon 0. Okay? So this will be K. Why we need to do this? Because we already have the orbit equation in terms of K. We will not use the integral form of the equation, because we have already integrated it for the 1 by R type potential. We have done it for the general case V is equal to minus K by R. The orbit comes out to be 1 by R equal to mk by L square into 1 plus epsilon cos theta minus theta prime. So with this orbit equation already in place, we need not use the integral form of the equation. We can straight away substitute, but for that we need to know K, and later on we'll need to substitute L in terms of S as we have done in the past. So identifying K as minus Z1 Z2 E square by 4 pi epsilon 0, we can later on substitute it here. Right now we are going to retain it as K and substitute in the last step only. Start with the orbit equation. 1 by R is equal to mk by L square times 1 plus epsilon cos theta minus theta prime. Theta prime, if you remember, is the orientation of the orbit. Okay. Epsilon itself is given by this expression, square root of 1 plus 2e L square by mk square. We are all aware about this. Okay. Let us take it forward. What do we do? Let us try to look at the geometry of the Rutherford scattering problem. Basically, you have a target which is a gold nucleus. You have a projectile which is an alpha particle. At least in the original problem, it was like this. If you look at this from the 1 by R or Kepler potential perspective, you know that this will be a hyperbolic orbit, because energy is greater than the zero of the potential energy. And since it is a hyperbolic orbit, you can imagine that it is basically one arm of the hyperbola, and the target is at one focus of the hyperbola. Okay. We have discussed this earlier when we were discussing central force motion. When we had the Kepler orbits, we had a brief discussion on repulsive orbits. Basically, for a repulsive orbit, the arm and the focus at which the center of force are present, they will be the opposite ones, because this is a repulsive potential. This makes sense physically, that particle comes from here, gets repelled from here, goes away. So target is not at this focus, it is at this focus. Just letting you know. Of course, one focus and one arm of the hyperbola are empty, as we have already discussed. Okay. So this is the target, this is the projectile, and basically the trajectory is a hyperbolic trajectory. We know this much. Let us try to correlate this with our scattering problem. Basically, we have got the scattering angle, which is the angle between the initial and final direction of the projectile. We have got the angle psi, which is the angle between the symmetry axis and the projectile trajectory. Okay. And basically in this particular figure, we have got the angle 0 and pi. 0 and pi. And pi is basically theta prime. Theta prime is the orientation part of the orbit, and that is basically pi. Okay. With this in mind, and of course we know that theta s is pi minus 2 psi. We also know that theta prime is pi. With this in mind, let us substitute it in the formula for the orbit, and you obtain the expression 1 by r is equal to mk by l square into 1 plus cos theta minus pi. Cos of theta minus pi is same as cos of pi minus theta, which will be minus cos theta. And so you end up with mk by l square into 1 minus epsilon cos theta. This is the expression for 1 by r. Now we will try to put the actual value of r and obtain a relation between theta and s. That is our next step. Basically, this is the same geometry which is shown here again, and this is the same orbit equation which we had. If you substitute the value of k had a negative sign. If you remember, you can take the negative sign inside the bracket, and therefore you will get 1 by r is equal to m z1 z2 e square upon 4 pi epsilon 0 l square into epsilon cos theta minus 1. Now, when r tends to infinity, at that time theta tends to be equal to psi. Okay. And which is basically pi minus theta s divided by 2. And if you follow through with this logic, then cos psi, which will be basically if r tends to infinity, then 1 by r goes to 0. If 1 by r goes to 0, all these constants go to the other side. We will get epsilon cos theta minus 1 is equal to 0, or cos theta is equal to 1 by epsilon. But theta is equal to psi, and hence cos psi is equal to 1 by epsilon, which means if you substitute for psi as pi minus theta by 2, you get cos pi minus theta by 2 equal to 1 by epsilon. Cos of pi by 2 minus theta by 2 is sin theta by 2. So sin theta by 2 will be equal to 1 by epsilon. I think this went very fast, so you can have a look. Okay. Basically, sin theta by 2 will be 1 by epsilon. Standard thing. It's just play of trigonometric ratio. The key point is that you have chosen one arm of the hyperbolic orbit where r tends to infinity. At r tends to infinity, 1 by r will be 0, but theta will obtain a certain angle which is psi, and from that all this comes out. Using sin theta s by 2 equal to 1 by epsilon. Now in epsilon there is a L square term, so we can try to substitute for s from there, equal to 1 plus 2e L square by m square, which is basically 1, which is just a rearrangement. You have multiplied and divided by e, multiplied and divided by 2, and hence you can write this as 4e square by k square into L square by 2me. L square by 2me is nothing but s square. And therefore, if you rearrange this, you will get square root of this thing will be cosec of theta s by 2. And if you square both the sides, you will get cosec square theta s by 2. And if you take the 1 on the other side, you will get cosec square minus 1. And hence you get the impact parameter is k by 2e times cot theta s by 2. This is the expression which you get for the impact parameter. So basically you have done the what you needed, because you have got the impact parameter as a function of the scattering angle, which was what was the aim. Now you are in a position to substitute this in the expression for the scattering cross section, and you will get the differential scattering cross section. This is the expression which we are looking for. Theta as a function of s, or in this case as we have got s as a function of theta. If you substitute s is equal to k by 2e cot theta s by 2 in the derivative, you will get k by 4e times cosec square theta s by 2. We have taken a modulus over here, and we have been doing this consistently. The reason for this is, the reason for this is that we have seen this, that at small impact parameters, the scattering angle is large, and at large impact parameters, the scattering angle is small. So basically, as s increases, the scattering angle decreases. But we want the cross section to be a number, a positive quantity, and hence we know that actual ds by d theta will be less than 0. That is why we take only the modulus, which just gives us the absolute value, and we are not worried about the sign, and therefore we only take the modulus. That is why the modulus is taken. So actually this gives you a minus sign, but when you take modulus, the minus sign goes away. Okay? And you have this expression for ds by d theta. Now you can substitute this in s upon sine theta ds by d theta. S will be k by 2e times cot theta by 2. You can and there will be another k by 4e times cosec square theta by 2. So you can take k by 4e common, multiplied by 2, and you have got 1 upon sine theta from the original expression. Sine theta can be written as 2 sine theta by 2 cos theta by 2. That 2 will cancel with this 2, and you will have cot theta by 2, which is cos upon sine. This will be 1 upon sine into cos. Cos will cancel. This will be 1 upon sine square. So finally you get 1 upon sine power 4, and that will get simplified as cosec power 4. So basically you get, substituting for k, you get theta is equal to z1 z2 e square upon 4 e into 4 pi epsilon 0, this whole thing whole square, multiplied by, important thing is cosec power 4 theta by 2. That is the famous cosec power 4 dependence, Rutherford scattering dependence, and that is the differential cross section for the Rutherford scattering. As you know, cosec theta at theta equal to 0, cosec theta is infinity, and at theta equal to pi by 2, cosec theta is equal to 1. So the scattering cross section is larger at small angles and falls off drastically because it has a cosec power 4 dependence. And that is what we saw in the initial diagram, that the lines are much more dense, scattering lines are much more dense at the smaller angles and much less dense at the large angles. That is something which we saw physically, but this is the mathematical expression for that. Okay. This is your final expression for the Rutherford scattering cross section. This is the Rutherford differential scattering cross section. If you try to integrate this over all angles, because of the cosec power 4, it diverges. The integral is basically diverges to infinity. Okay. So the total cross section turns out to be infinite, as we had guessed by looking at the diagram. The differential cross section has a very steep theta dependence, something which we also guessed by looking at the diagram. Okay. This is a final expression, and just to understand the features of Rutherford scattering from this, first observation is that it is proportional to both Z1 square and Z2 square. So if I shoot a proton instead of an alpha particle, the cross section goes down by a factor of 4. But it will go down uniformly independent of angle. So the total cross section will also go down by a factor of 4. And differential cross section at every angle will also go down. Similarly, if I increase the Z, then I get a larger cross section. Okay. The second point is, if you observe, theta is inversely proportional to the the sigma is inversely proportional to square of the energy. So higher the energy of the projectile, smaller is the cross section. The physical reason for this is very interesting. You would have imagined that if energy increases, cross section should increase. I mean, why is it decreasing? Basically, higher the energy, higher is the velocity. Higher the velocity, the particle comes very fast and it spends less amount of time in the vicinity of the target. It comes, it goes, doesn't get time to talk to the target, and therefore doesn't get time to be influenced by the target. Interaction time is small when energy is large, and since interaction time is small, the cross section is small. Okay. This gives you a physical feel which is very important, that interaction time is a very important parameter in determining cross sections. Larger the interaction time, larger will be the cross section, and hence lower the velocity, larger will be the cross section. As energy increases, cross section keeps on decreasing. Okay. Third point, cross section falls very sharply as a function of theta. In fact, if you plot it, this is the dependence which you get. At different values of theta s, the cross section goes down drastically. Okay. So it is very large at smaller angles, and as you go for larger angles, it becomes very, very low. And it is non-zero even at 180 degrees, because cosec theta will be 1. But it is very, very small compared to what it is at the forward angle. So when you have Rutherford scattering kind of thing, you expect large amount of scattering in the forward direction, very less amount in the backward direction. That is what was original observation of Rutherford. But original expectation of Rutherford was that everything should go through. So cross section should be 1 or very large at 0 degree, and everywhere else it should be 0. That did not happen. So this is kind of more at smaller angle and less at larger angle, but what was expected was none at any angle other than the 0 angle. That was the expectation of Rutherford. This was the observation, and this is what initiated a lot of physics developments which took place in the 20th century. The original advent of particle accelerators was because of the Rutherford alpha scattering experiment. Radioactivity, understanding of radioactivity, understanding of atomic structure, and basically due to development of particle physics, understanding of development of accelerators, understanding of elementary particle physics, all of this came out from this one particular very, very important experiment. Okay, so actually, according to me, this is one of the real disruptive moments in the history of physics, disruptive innovation moments. It led to a lot of interesting developments. Okay, Bohr model of the atom was possible because of the alpha scattering. Anyway, that was my bit about the importance of the Rutherford scattering experiment. By the way, interesting fact, when you do this by the methods of quantum mechanics, you get exactly the same result for the cross section. I have no explanation for this. It is just a fact that the same formula comes even in the quantum mechanical calculation, even though you use a completely different formalism for that. Okay, that was just an additional piece of information. This is more or less what I wanted to discuss today. If there are any question about any part, please ask and we can discuss those things.